Civil war, famine, and warnings of genocide. What's gone wrong in the world's youngest country, South Sudan? 2 years after it gained independence in 2011, a civil war erupted between supporters of the current president and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement and his former vice president. My guest today is the widow of John Garang, the founder of the SPLM, and is considered by many to be the mother of South Sudan. Rebecca Mama Garang fought in the Second Sudanese Civil War and went on to serve in President Salva Kiir's cabinet, but has since become one of his leading critics. She joins me now. Rebecca Garang, thanks for being here on UpFront. Earlier this week, the UN declared a famine in 2 counties of South Sudan, affecting more than 100,000 people. They warned that a further 1 million people in your country are on the brink of famine, and they call this humanitarian catastrophe man-made. Who, in your view, is to blame for it?
Of course, it's the leader, President Salva Kiir, because it's a man-made famine. So anything being done good in the country or bad is always going to the president. So everything, I think, is with our President Salva Kiir Mayardit. He did not, or all of us, as the leaders of South Sudan, we did not lead our people properly. Even salaries of his officials are not being paid. Those who are in the embassies are not being paid because there's no money. And the UN was saying that the estimate was 100,000. It is very little. The estimate is higher than that because there are those who are in the neighboring countries, in Uganda, in Kenya and Ethiopia.
So you have a country where famine is looming for the entire country, millions of people potentially affected. And then you also have a country where the people are not just at risk of starvation. The UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide has warned that it's also a place where there is a potential for genocide. And you've agreed with the UN. You've said that, quote, a genocide is looming. You've said that 64 tribes in your country are at each other's throats.
Yes.
But who are the perpetrators of this genocide, and who will the victims of this genocide be if, God forbid, it happens?
You know, our leaders are using the name of their tribes in order for them to cling to power. So President Salva, because he's from Dinka, he's using the name of Dinka. And his vice president, former vice president, Dr. Riek Machar, is a Nuer. So everything is attributed to Nuer. When they started, the crisis started in 2013. It was the elements in the government of Salva Kiir who are Dinka who killed Nuer. And then now, when the crisis of July 7th started, it is not only the Dinka Nuer, it has engulfed the whole South Sudan.
So what is the solution to this violence? The ceasefire that was signed in August 2015 between President Salva Kiir and his former vice president, Riek Machar, it hasn't really held, has it? No. Even though there's 11,000, I believe, UN troops on the ground in South Sudan. So what do you do? Do you have a new peace process? Do you try recycling a ceasefire? Are you calling for some kind of foreign military intervention?
We are calling for a dialogue where the whole people of South Sudan are brought on the table so that they discuss the issues concerning them, because their government is not doing anything. President Salva called for dialogue. He appointed himself to be the patron of the dialogue when he is a party to the problem.
Are you calling for him to stand down, President Kiir?
Yes. He has to, because if Dr. Riek is not in the equation.
You served as advisor to the president on gender and human rights from 2011 to 2014, or end of 2013. And yet during that period, before the civil war had even broken out, Human Rights Watch reported that government forces were responsible for extrajudicial killings and torture. Some might say, what kind of human rights advisor were you that you couldn't prevent those human rights abuses happening on your watch?
I'm an advisor. I'm supposed to talk on the ears of the president for what I have seen. And I did my role. For 3 years, he didn't listen to you? Is that what you're saying? Nothing. Even appointment is very difficult to get appointment to our president. It's very hard for me to get an appointment. It can go even sometimes to 6 months.
Did you at least condemn the human rights abuses by armed forces in your country while you were in government?
And I didn't go out publicly, but I talked with the president. And in 2013, I publicly talked about it. I say that the government is killing one tribe. Why?
Human rights abuses haven't just happened under President Kiir, though, have they? When your late husband was leader of the Sudan People's Liberation Army, he himself was accused of quite egregious human rights abuses, including the recruitment of child soldiers to fight for him. You were at his side at that time. Did that not bother you?
This was a liberation struggle. We were at war. And you know, the war is, the country, South Sudan is very vast. It's a big country. Dr. John tried to command the army. Some small things can happen under his watch, but when he hears about it, he has to do something about it.
Human Rights Watch wrote in 1993, prisoners, several thousand refugee children were spirited away from a camp in northern Kenya, almost certainly to serve on Garang's front line. Several thousand refugee children. That's a massive crime against humanity.
It was not correct. That's
what Human Rights Watch reported in 1993.
Human Rights was talking about that, but it was not correct because I'm there and a mother, and I have my children.
So there were no child soldiers fighting in your cause?
There are children who went because sometimes they don't go to school. And then when you leave them redundant, they follow the...
So better to give them a gun?
They follow the army.
So better to give them a gun and put them in your armed forces?
They were not giving guns, but they were following the army.
They were not given guns, but they were child soldiers?
They were following the army themselves because they could not, because there is no school where they were going.
Just to be clear, as part of your liberation struggle, did you and your husband recruit child soldiers to fight?
No, we didn't.
So Human Rights Watch is wrong and other human rights groups?
Yes, the children came with their parents, and some of them just follow the army because sometimes when they go with the army, they can find better services of food and things like that. Because we are in the bush, some of the children even leave their parents and they follow the army. So there was no official recruitment which was being done. Okay, well, Human Rights Watch says you forcibly recruited child soldiers. Interestingly, your late husband, John Garang, wanted a new Sudan, but he didn't want an independent South Sudan, as you did. But when you see what's happened in South Sudan since independence in 2011, do you have any regrets? Do you think maybe in hindsight he was right and you were wrong? In the situation where we are in, we listen, as politicians, we listen to the voice of our people. So now what happened is that, according to the agreement, South Sudan succeeded because they think that under a united Sudan, there was no justice. So they wanted to be alone. No, I understand why you did it, and I understand it had massive popular support. I think 98% of the people voted for it in a referendum. All I'm saying is, in hindsight, 6 years later, you've had civil war, you've had famine, you may, God forbid, have genocide. Do you stop and think, you know what, this whole South Sudanese project, independence, was a mistake? No, it happened. It happened to a new country. It's not unique. Not every new country goes through civil war, famine, and genocide. It's not unique in the situation of South Sudan. There's not many countries. It's not unique. And what happened is that this is why we wanted to correct this situation. We wanted to correct this situation of what we are doing as the leaders to our own people. We'll have to leave it there. Rebecca Garang, thank you for joining me on the show. That's our show. Up Front will be back in April.